A Grandmother's Voice, Reclaiming Life After Sacrifice. Margaret Wilson had envisioned her retirement as a well-earned escape into peace. After 32 years working as a librarian in the quiet suburbs of Seattle, she finally closed the final chapter of her career at the age of 64. Her husband, Robert, a retired high school math teacher, had already embraced the slower pace of life, enjoying early morning walks, tending to his vegetable garden, and indulging in a lifelong love for chess and jazz music. Together, they planned to fill their golden years with art, books, weekend road trips, and lazy afternoons spent side by side. But just 2 months into retirement, Margaret's life veered off that tranquil path. It started on a typical Sunday afternoon. Their younger son, Daniel, dropped by with his wife, Julie, and their 2 energetic sons, Noah, 10, and Caleb, 7. The boys were a whirlwind of noise and motion, bounding through the living room, knocking over coasters and Lego bricks alike. As Robert chuckled and offered juice boxes, Daniel sat beside Margaret with a furrowed brow. "Mom," he began cautiously, "Julie and I are both working longer hours. I've got that new promotion, and she's helping launch a big project. It's been chaos. We were hoping you could watch the boys after school, just until we get home from work. 3 to 7, Monday through Friday. Just for a little while." Margaret looked at her grandsons, innocent, sweet, and full of life, and then back at her son. The request seemed manageable. After all, she was retired now, with her days wide open. She smiled and said, "Of course, just for now." She had no idea how quickly just for now would turn into every single day. At first, Margaret didn't mind. She enjoyed hearing about the boys' school day, helping with homework, and cooking simple dinners like spaghetti or grilled cheese sandwiches. But soon, the favor transformed into an expectation. Daniel and Julie stopped asking. They began assuming. The boys were dropped off daily, without so much as a confirmation text. Margaret was expected not only to feed and supervise them, but also to cook full dinners, keep their favorite snacks stocked, clean up their messes, and settle their increasingly frequent fights. Within a month, Margaret was exhausted. She loved her grandsons, but their energy was endless. Caleb wanted to be chased in the backyard after school, and Noah, entering that early phase of adolescence, was moody and defiant. Margaret found herself collapsed on the couch every night by 9, too tired to read, too sore to stand for long. Her grocery bill nearly doubled. Juice boxes, frozen pizzas, yogurt pouches, and endless cartons of milk filled her fridge. What started as an act of love began to feel like unpaid labor. The emotional toll was even heavier. Her weekends, once filled with leisurely walks, art classes, and time with friends, became 2-day recovery periods. She stopped going to her watercolor class. She declined invitations from her book club. Her world shrank to the size of her home and her 2 grandsons. The worst part was the silence. When Margaret finally hinted that she might need a break, Daniel dismissed her gently but firmly. "You're retired, Mom," he said. "It's not like you're busy." That night, Margaret sat at the edge of her bed and cried. She didn't feel angry so much as invisible. She had become an unpaid babysitter, a housekeeper, a short-order cook, and no one seemed to notice her fading joy. One Tuesday afternoon, the weight of it all became physical. As she bent down to retrieve a toy from under the couch, a sharp pain shot through her lower back. She froze, breathless. Robert had to help her to the couch and rub out the spasms. The next day, the doctor confirmed it. A strained muscle, worsened by overexertion and a lack of proper rest. That evening, Robert had had enough. "You're not their employee, Margaret," he said, his voice laced with concern and frustration. "You've been running yourself into the ground. I'm calling Daniel." Margaret objected. "He's stressed enough already. I don't want to cause a fight." But Robert was firm. He called their son and spoke plainly. "Your mother is not okay," he told Daniel. "She's not a substitute parent. You've been using her kindness as a crutch. It needs to stop." Daniel was stunned into silence. "I thought she wanted to help," he said. Robert replied, "You never asked if she still wanted to." To his credit, Daniel listened. Within 2 weeks, he and Julie enrolled the boys in a local after-school program. It wasn't easy, financially or logistically, but they managed. Margaret still helped now and then, but only on her terms, and only when she felt up to it. And for the first time in months, she had her life back. She pulled out her easel from the garage, dusted it off, and placed it by the living room window where sunlight streamed in. She began to paint again, sunsets, birds, fruit bowls, portraits of her grandsons. Robert said the color had returned to her cheeks. She began taking long walks, journaling, and even signed up for a pottery class. Then one day, her friend Linda invited her to join a small group of retired women for lunch at a local diner. They called themselves the Lunch Club. Most were in their late 60s and early 70s, former teachers, nurses, social workers, and stay-at-home moms. Over BLTs and iced tea, they shared stories, laughed, and slowly began to open up about their lives. One day, after weeks of casual meetups, Margaret shared her story. "I was exhausted," she said. "I thought I was helping, but somewhere along the way, I lost myself. I didn't know how to say no." The women around the table nodded solemnly. "We've all been there," said Helen, a grandmother of 4. "My daughter drops off her twins every Saturday morning and picks them up at bedtime. I love them, but it's like running a daycare." Another chimed in. "We call it the second shift. You think you're done raising kids, and then you're not." They talked about guilt, about pressure, about being too afraid to speak up. They called it grandparent burnout, a hidden epidemic no one talked about. From that conversation, something sparked in Margaret. What if there were more people like them, struggling silently, giving too much, unsure how to reclaim their own time? A few weeks later, Margaret proposed an idea to the local library, a monthly support group for grandparents juggling caregiving roles. The director loved it. They called it Grandparents in Balance. The first meeting drew 12 attendees. By the third month, they had more than 30. The group shared tips, vented frustrations, hosted visiting counselors, and even created a booklet on boundary setting for grandparents. Margaret had not only found her own voice, she helped others find theirs too. One rainy afternoon, Caleb handed her a folded paper with colorful crayon scribbles. "It's for school," he said shyly. "We had to write about someone we admire." Margaret opened the note and read, "My grandma Margaret makes the best pancakes. She plays pirates with me and tells funny stories. She always makes me feel safe. She is kind and strong, even when she's tired. I love her a lot." Tears filled her eyes. In that moment, she knew she had made the right choice. Saying no hadn't weakened their bond. It had made it stronger. Her love for her grandsons was still deep and true, but now it came from a place of fullness, not depletion. Margaret learned that loving your family doesn't mean sacrificing yourself. That boundaries don't make you selfish, they make you whole. And that retirement wasn't the end of her purpose. It was the beginning of a new, wiser chapter. Now, every Sunday afternoon, the boys come over for pancakes and board games. Margaret paints in the mornings, hosts her group once a month, and sometimes just sits quietly by the window with a cup of tea. The birds still come, the light still shifts, and her life, finally, is her own again. Margaret's story didn't end with the easing of her caregiving responsibilities. In fact, it only deepened and blossomed. With her schedule no longer dictated by the after-school chaos, she found herself reflecting on how many other grandparents might be going through what she had, and how few of them had the courage or support to speak up. The Grandparents in Balance group grew steadily. It evolved from a casual gathering into something far more impactful. Margaret was invited to give a talk at the community center 1 month after their third meeting. The subject was simple: caring without burning out. She stood in front of a room of 40 strangers, clutching a few handwritten notes, her heart thudding in her chest. "I thought love meant always saying yes," she began, her voice wavering slightly. "But what I learned, what I'm still learning, is that love must also include care for yourself. Otherwise, it isn't love. It's martyrdom." The audience was silent for a moment, then erupted in applause. Grandparents, mostly women but a few men too, approached her afterward to share their own stories, some weeping, others simply grateful to be seen. One woman in her 70s confided, "My daughter hasn't had a Saturday off in 10 years. She calls me her built-in babysitter." I haven't told her I'm exhausted. I didn't know I could. It was as if a dam had broken. Margaret started receiving emails and phone calls from strangers who had heard about the group. Local radio interviewed her. A regional parenting magazine published her story under the title, "The Second Shift No One Talks About." Daniel, to his credit, began to understand. With the boys in their after-school program, he and Julie had more energy and clarity. And with time and therapy, they both acknowledged they had taken Margaret for granted. One evening, Daniel visited her alone. He brought a bottle of wine and sat with her at the kitchen table. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he began. "You were right. We were selfish. I guess we were just drowning and reached for the nearest life raft without asking if it could float. I'm sorry." Margaret placed her hand over his. "We all do what we can with the tools we have, but we all need to learn better tools. I'm proud of you for seeing that." From that evening on, their relationship shifted. Daniel no longer saw his mother as someone who owed him time, but as a full person with her own needs and rhythms. Margaret, in turn, allowed herself to show up as a grandmother not out of obligation, but out of choice. Meanwhile, her days became rich with color, literally and figuratively. Her painting hobby evolved into passion. She joined a local artist cooperative, where she displayed some of her works: a soft watercolor of Caleb playing in the yard, a bold acrylic of Noah's furrowed brow as he read comic books on the couch, and a stunning self-portrait, her eyes strong, tired, but unwavering. She no longer painted to pass the time. She painted to process. Every canvas was a chapter of her reclaimed life. Robert, always her steady anchor, delighted in her newfound confidence. "You're like a new woman," he teased one evening as she fussed over framing a piece for an upcoming gallery show. "No," she replied, her eyes crinkling with a smile. "I'm finally the old one I was meant to be." They traveled again, short trips at first, like weekends to the Oregon coast, and then longer ones, a fall foliage road trip through New England, and a spring escape to Santa Fe, where she fell in love with desert light. Each journey renewed their bond and reminded them why they had dreamed of this phase of life to begin with. Back home, Margaret expanded the reach of Grandparents in Balance. She partnered with a nonprofit that supported multi-generational households. Together, they created workshops on communication strategies, financial boundaries, and healthy caregiving habits. Margaret was invited to speak at a national aging conference in Denver. Her topic: redefining the grandparent role in the 21st century. On the flight home, she looked out over the clouds, marveling at the arc of her own journey. She had once feared she would be swallowed up by guilt, duty, and fatigue. Now she was lifting others out of those same waters. And yet, she was still, at heart, just a grandma who loved pancakes and puzzles and Saturday mornings spent playing Uno. One day in late spring, as the lilacs bloomed in her backyard, Margaret received a letter in the mail. It was from Julie. The note was handwritten on delicate stationery. "Dear Margaret, I've been wanting to say this for a while, but words never quite felt like enough. Thank you for what you gave us, and more importantly, for what you taught us. I see now how easy it is to blur love with expectation. I see how hard it must have been for you to say no to us. But I'm grateful you did. You reminded me that strength isn't about always giving. It's about knowing when to stop and protect your own peace. The boys adore you, not because you said yes to everything, but because you made them feel loved, seen, and safe. Thank you for being the kind of woman I hope to grow into one day. With love, Julie." Margaret folded the letter carefully and placed it in the wooden box, where she kept precious things, baby photos, old travel postcards, and now this, a reminder that the hardest boundaries often bear the richest fruit. Life continued to move forward. The boys got older. Noah started middle school and began showing an interest in computer programming. Caleb took up soccer and asked his grandparents to come to every game. They did. From the bleachers, Margaret cheered like a schoolgirl, a bright scarf wrapped around her shoulders, a thermos of hot cider in hand. She was no longer exhausted. She was energized by clarity, by intention, by balance. Her story began as one of quiet sacrifice. It could have ended there. But Margaret, like so many women of her generation, chose something different. She chose to speak, to step back, and to show that love doesn't mean losing yourself. It means bringing your full self and saying, without shame, "This is what I can give, and this is what I cannot." Years later, when Caleb graduated high school, he gave a short speech at his celebration dinner. After thanking his parents, his teachers, and his coach, he looked toward his grandmother. "And thank you, Grandma," he said, "for teaching me that kindness doesn't mean saying yes all the time. It means caring enough to be honest. You taught me how to be strong." Margaret wiped a tear from her cheek. In her 70s now, she still painted. She still hosted the support group, now co-led with a friend. She and Robert adopted a rescue dog named Biscuit, who followed her like a shadow. Her garden bloomed every spring. Her laughter echoed down the street. Her voice, once hesitant, once hidden, had become a beacon. She was not just a grandmother. She was a woman who had rewritten the narrative of aging, caregiving, and sacrifice. A woman who had found power in the word no, and beauty in the life she reclaimed. And on quiet mornings, with the light streaming through the kitchen window and birdsong in the distance, Margaret Wilson would smile to herself, because in the end, she had learned the most important lesson of all, that love, to be true, must include yourself in its circle. If Margaret's story touched your heart or reminded you of someone you know, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up to help more people discover it. Share it with friends, parents, or grandparents who might be silently carrying the same burden. You never know whose life you might help change just by spreading this message. We'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and tell us, have you or someone you love ever faced the pressure of caregiving in silence? How did you find balance again? Your story matters. And if you believe in real stories that inspire, empower, and make us reflect, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We share more heartfelt narratives, just like this one. Stories that remind us it's never too late to take back your voice. Hit the bell icon so you won't miss our next story. Thank you for being here. You are not alone.